resume. It's 5 pages long. The gentleman's done everything. He brought his brother with him as well. We'd like to thank him for showing. So, Mr. Bisson, come on up here and say some words. We absolutely are grateful that we have another party coming up here who will come up on this stage and make it happen, and we thank you very much. And then I'm going to have the chance to ask him a couple of questions, and I'm going to take a couple of questions from the floor for Mr. Bisson. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad to be here, to everybody here in Ottawa who's come to visit, but also all you on the internet. It is really exciting how the social media has changed how we organize in this world. We saw, for example, in the uprising in Egypt, where it was the social media that organized, essentially throwing a government out of power. Well, in this case, the social media is being organized, and we're trying to get the government to turn around. So, to all of you that are out there on social media, all of you that are here today, congratulations. Keep the pressure up. I want to first of all bring greetings on behalf of our MPP caucus. I'm not the energy critic. I'm the House Leader for the New Democrats. Peter Tabuns is our energy critic, and I'd also like to bring greetings from Andrew Horvath. Ontario used to have the cheapest electricity rates across the country. We were at par with Manitoba. We were at par with the province of Quebec. We had at that time a public utility that had a mandate to generate electricity and to sell it back at cost. And the reason for that was to create the many jobs that we used to have in Ontario that were very, very dependent on energy. I come from Timmins. Who knows where that is? Well, we used to have a company up there called originally Falconbridge that had a refinery and a smelter in the city of Timmins. It employed some 700 people, plus everybody else who supported that particular enterprise. They decided to close that place down a few years back, and the sole reason they shut it down is they had a refinery in Quebec and they had a refinery in Ontario. And they said, well, we can refine our metals in Quebec at 3 times less the price for electricity, when the largest bill they got to pay is hydro. Where did they go?
Quebec.
They went to Quebec. And the province of Ontario at the time, Dalton McGuinty, we met with him, the city of Timmins, the unions, along with my federal counterpart, and Falconbridge, and said, listen, Dalton, we need you to stand with our community and do something about what these hydro rates are doing to industries across Ontario. And it fell on deaf ears. And the same thing has happened in communities across this province, where a number of industries that are very energy dependent have gone south in the sense of closing up shop and moving away because they can't afford the high hydro rates. Now, you wonder, why is it that electricity prices have gone up? It's a real simple reason. The government moved some years ago, first under Mike Harris and then under Ernie Eves, to both deregulate the system and to start privatization. Dalton McGuinty stood in opposition with me and said, I'm going to fight Mr. Harris and I'm going to fight Mr. Eves when it comes to the privatization of our electricity system. And he said, if you vote for me, you can trust I'm going to do the right thing for Ontarians and I'm going to stop this privatization. Well, what did they do when they got the power? They put on the accelerator, they stepped on the gas, and we have now privatized a large part of the generation side of Ontario Hydro. But here's the deal. We used to generate about 25,000 megs at any one time for demand, on a demand at the time of around 21,000 megs. We're now down to about 15 or 16,000 because of all of the companies that have closed down. But the point is, the government has signed private power contracts with companies that make electricity at 3 times the rate that it cost us as a province to generate electricity. There are power dams in my riding who can generate electricity at 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and because of these contracts they signed with the private sector, we're having to pay 12 to 20 cents an hour for power even if we don't need it. So today what's happening, my friends, we generate an additional 10 to 12,000 megs of private power, and when they need the electricity in order to power our homes and to power our industry, they have to buy from that pool first because they've signed contracts. Well, what's happening with the rest of the power that we generate as a result of public power? The dams in my community, we flow the water over the top. Or we take the motors and we run them as generators to take load off the system and to balance it out. There are incidences where our nuclear reactors at Darlington and at Pickering are boiling water to generate electricity. Electricity is not needed. We warm Lake Ontario. Well, tell me what kind of sense that makes. The Liberals have completely, and Bob Chiarellis as a Minister of Energy should be ashamed of this. They have designed a system that is now 3 times more expensive than it ever was, and we are now finding ourselves in a situation where employers like Falconbridge are closing down plants, where people are losing their jobs and are having to move away, and the rest of us who have to pay hydro bills at home are getting really gouged. Now, I'm a lucky man. I have a house in a town called Timmins, and my brother and I own a cottage out at Kapuskasing. The price that I pay for electricity at Kapuskasing versus the city of Timmins is a higher rate. But here's the great one. Hydro won because Mr. McGuinty at the time thought it was a great idea, got them to change their billing system. I got a bill a year and a half ago for $19,000 worth of back power. They all of a sudden tried to tell my brother and I that we owed them $19,000 for electricity we had used, but they had just forgot to charge us. Well, I want to ask you a question. If you take your car and you drive to the gas station, and the guy who sold you the gas for the last 2 years says, "Oh, you know what? My pump was wrong. Give me an extra $500 bucks." What are you going to do? Well, hydro the same thing. So myself, along with a whole bunch of other examples where this has happened, fought back hydro. We were fairly successful in getting the hydro off the backs of these individuals. There is still some that we're fighting over, but it's still a problem. So where do we find ourselves today? Well, there was an election to elect a new leader of the Liberal Party. And our friend Kathleen Wynne said, "Vote for me. I'm going to be the most progressive premier in the history of Ontario, Canada, the world, and I think the universe." And you know what? People bought it last election. She won fair and square. She said, "I'm progressive. I'm not going to do things that Tim Hudak is suggesting, and I'm going to do things in a different way because I care." And you know, you can trust me. If you look in my soul and look deep into my heart, you're going to see that I'm a different kind of premier, and I really do care about it. Oh my God. She cares so much that we're now seeing at our hospitals across this province, nurses being laid off by the hundreds. I was just informed yesterday by a nurse in our community that our emergency department is going to drop down to 2 nurses on night shift when it comes to being able to care people coming through the door. We have a big hospital there. It's a district hospital. It means to say that if you think you're waiting in the emerge now, it's going to get worse. But then she says, "You know what? I want to build transit." I'm in favor of transit. I think you're all in favor of transit. I think we all understand we need a good system of transportation. But she says, "The only way I can pay for this is to privatize Hydro One." Give me a break. Privatizing Hydro One is going to drive your hydro bill, which is already going up by 40%, beyond that. Because companies have a very simple mandate: to return equity to the shareholder, to give them returns on their investment. So they're going to have to charge more to be able to give that return to those investors. And who's going to pay? It's you, it's me, it's industries across this province, all because Kathleen Wynne has lost her way. So I say to all of you who are here today, you need to continue organizing. You need to continue organizing these type of rallies and other actions in order to put some pressure on the government. There's going to be a bill that's going to come through the House, probably the budget bill. And that budget bill will give an opportunity for the budget to go into committee. When that bill goes to committee, it's important that people in communities like Ottawa, people in Kingston, and different communities across Ontario demand that that bill come to their community so they can have their say about what this government is doing. This is the single largest privatization scheme in the history of Ontario. And Kathleen Wynne doesn't have the right nor the mandate to do that. So I'm asking you, keep an eye on what's going on at Queen's Park. When you see that bill going to committee, write to the committee. You can find it on the Legislative Assembly website to ask that the committee comes to your community to be able to have your say. So, sur la part de moi-même, tous les ceux de mon comté de Timmins Bay James et aussi la chef et hôte au Parti néo-démocrate, on vous félicite pour l'ouvrage que vous avez fait. On dit continuez le bon travail et ensemble, on va survivre. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Bisson. Listen, a couple quick questions I have for you. Hypothetically, if the NDP were to win the election tomorrow, what would you and your party do to fix what has happened here?
Well, the first thing, we wouldn't privatize. We'd stop the privatization. The second thing is, All of these contracts that have been signed are signed for 15 to 20 years. As those contracts come due, you don't re-sign them, because that's what's killing the hydro rate. So it means to say, yes, some of those companies may end up going down, but it's the only way that you're able to get that under control. The other thing that we are very, very much in favor of, something that should have happened a long time ago, we need to invest in conservation. How many people need better windows and insulation in their houses?
Already did it.
How many people need better furnaces? How many people could put passive solar on the roof in order to be able to pre-warm the water or to be able to help generate electricity, whatever it might be? We need to invest in those kinds of programs so that you and I as citizens can become part of finding ways to conserve energy for two reasons. Because every megawatt you don't have to generate is money that we save, but more important, if you're saving energy conservation at home, it means you're not going to have to pay as much hydro. So conservation is the other part.
And go ahead. I'm going to take a couple questions. I just want to ask them over time. You've been in, 15 years? 25 years. You're ready for parole. My goodness gracious, you must feel like I need to get out. How do you handle when you run into constituents or the general public? They're frustrated. Nothing seems to ever happen. How do you act, or how do you handle that as politicians? I know you just got to pretty well move on, but it comes to a point where, my goodness gracious, I can see the frustration, I can see the blood in your eyes, you're mad, you're frustrated. How do you handle that?
I think the first thing we have as a responsibility as elected officials is to listen, not to run away and say, well, they're mad at me and I'm not going to hear what they got to say. That's the first thing. But the second thing is to try to do the things that help. I've got a number of constituents who got those $19,000 hydro bills. Myself and my office and other members across Ontario were working hard to get those issues resolved so they didn't have to pay those bills. I have a number of constituents, unfortunately, who find themselves in a situation, two people retiring, one of them dies, and they can't afford to keep the house. Why? Because they can't afford to pay the utilities and the taxes. So clearly we've got to change direction and make life more affordable for people, because we are starting to lose what is the Canadian dream.
Okay, questions. I got a couple questions. Come on up here and you're going to tell... Come here.
Just a couple.
Yeah, no, just a couple, but I think this is important we hear from the public. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, who do you think Kathleen Wynne will be selling Hydro 1 to? It'll be all to her Liberal friends.
I'll let you comment.
Well, it's pretty well, she's saying who's going to sell, who's Kathleen Wynne going to sell it to? It will be her Liberal friends. They have said only 60% will be sold. Well, that, the way I figure it, means to say we lose our control. But they're saying only 10% to one buyer. What do you think those 6 or 8 buyers are going to do? They're going to create a consortium to do what it is that they want. When's the last time you put gas in your truck or car? I got an F-150. Last couple of days? Did you look at the price of the barrel? Did you look at the price of the pump? That's what the OEB is doing to us. The price of the barrel has gone down and the price of gas is still more than it's worth of the barrel. So I just say we can't afford what this government is doing. For them to argue the OEB is the solution is wrong.
All right, I got 2 questions quick.
When are they going to stop talking about conservation? Everybody's going hungry in the dark as it is. We don't need to conserve anymore. We have to stop overcharging for something we have an abundance of. Yes. We're giving it away. Yes. We're giving it away, and then we're turning around and charging us for stuff that we have an abundance of. It is called extortion. The mob would be ashamed.
Really see the passion there.
Well, listen, I'm going to disagree with you. How many politicians you ever see do that? I agree with you that we're being squeezed and we can't afford to make ends meet. But if we can put in place real conservation programs who allow citizens to be able to change their furnace, insulate their windows, do whatever it is, it will reduce their consumption if you do it in a way that the person doesn't have to outlay the money. There's ways of doing that.
We're already doing that.
Correct.